is okay?
Yeah, good. Well, let's start to speak about the mission of HPB. And maybe in small remark, it will be speaking about the mission of Helena Blavatsky and not on the person Blavatsky. Maybe in very little, but the main thing is the mission, where she was coming from. And this is the last series in a whole line of series. We're speaking about contributing to 2000 years of the future of Theosophy. And we have tried to make clear in the whole line of lectures from January on what that mission was and what the Masters and the Lords of Wisdom and Compassion was and how it works together and so on. So this evening we will just focus on what Blavatsky is doing, and we have a very important question as well. It is not only the mission, but also how do we continue her work? Because that is another very important thing. So it is not a matter of what she was doing and what we have received, but what will we do on our turn with it? We have a number of steps in the presentation of this evening. Before 1875, 75, 80, 91, after 1891 till now, and we try to have a look in the future and see what we have to do there. Of course, people what attended the other lectures, they have seen this information already before, but certainly for the new people coming in this evening, is that we start our tradition of human beings as thinking beings 18 million a year ago, where humanity was receiving help from the Masters of Wisdom and started to activate the thinking facility. So that is a very important thing, yeah. And they did it by injecting ideas of wisdom into the field of our thinking, so that we were able to pick it up and receive it as ideas and start to get activating in our thinking, start to work with the ideas we received and so on. Yeah, and that information was coming from an hierarchical line of messages. If you go to January, where we have done the first series by Erwin Bomers, he has rolled out a complete, well, a reasonable complete picture over all the, let's say, 80 million of years, the activities there were and how it was named and how it was looked like, yeah? The only restriction, of course, we have by receiving ideas is that we have to be pure, yeah? Otherwise, we are not able to receive them in the proper way. Let's see what was before 1875. And we read it on different places in the literature that the messages, what has to come in 1875, was having a very long preparation. Yeah, many years before there was a preparation for 1875. The training of Blavatsky, yeah, but there was also another requirement. And what is good is to realize that it was not picking a person who was willing to do that, a human being. No, he has to be in a perfect combination, what I have called here transmitter and receiver, in a perfect combination between that human being and the Lords of Wisdom and Compassion. And that was a very important thing, yeah? That is needed to have a person what is able to pass on all that information, what the Master had in mind to roll out after 1875, yeah? And you can read in the Mahatma letters, and I have said letter 26, and that is the 26th letter in the chronological sequence of the Mahatma letters, done by Vic Hao Chin. And they say after nearly a century, yeah, of searching, yeah, then they were able to find a human body, because that was the requirement, yeah, because she has to go to the West, to Europe and the United States. So you are looking for a person what has qualities in that directions, frequencies, properties, whatever you want to call it, yeah. And so that it was possible to have someone what has the right capacities, be able to train, willing to be trained. That is also a very important thing. Yeah. And then, of course, the training period, and then the start in 1875. We all know that Blavatsky was starting rolling out the Theosophy since 1875 till the day she was dying in 1891. And that was a very intense period for Blavatsky. And that is, of course, she had four main functions, you can say. Yeah. First, we have the the person, Blavatsky. We have the human being, Blavatsky. We have the one, what I called here, the typewriter of the master. That is a really funny expression, but that was what she was doing. She was receiving ideas and was working that out on typing so that it was possible to publish. And she was an intermediate for what we called HPB and others. Yeah, HPB was a higher force making use of Blavatsky. Yeah, and the others zijn, for instance, the Mahatmas, Kodumi, Master Moria, and a couple of others. They used Blavatsky to, let's say, inject ideas into the West. Blavatsky had the challenge to take them on, to work them out, show them, and the masters were looking in it, correcting it, and so on. And then it was coming to publications. And that was, let's say, the main way all the publications like Isis Unveiled, the Key to Theosophy, the Secret Doctrine, the Voice of the Silence, all that literature what was published was made more or less in this way. Yeah, a mix sometimes of the forces behind her. It was not always exactly the same one, but let's say that was very important. And the one what we called HPB, that was the one what is, let's say, a force, a being what was making use of Blavatsky in a very, let's say, high way, in a high, let's say, in a high intensity. Yeah. So that was quite some challenge to have that combination. And if you read the Mahatma letters, and you see, for instance, how people like Sinnett and Hume who react on Blavatsky, then you read easily that Blavatsky was quite an, how do you say that, an intense woman to cope with. But it was mainly, one of the reasons was that she was prepared to be able to do this function. And to do this function, they had to call it, to tune her, let's say, intermediate nature a bit so that it was more, let's say, accessible, more controllable, better to be used. But it was also bringing, let's say, some, let's say, explosive reaction, what you can read sometimes. No? When she was coming up in 1875 in New York, and she was coming, and the first statement she was doing was, I have come to break the molds of minds. And you can ask yourself, why is that so important? Molds of minds. Yeah. And you can read it on different places, but the great danger of a human being in his development, in trying to develop his thinking and growing and so on, is that he is becoming passive. And one of the masters say that passive is the biggest risk you can take as a human being. So that means that you don't investigate, you don't think, you are what you are, you leave everything as it is, and in other ways you stop your development. And that is certainly not what we have to do as human beings. We have to develop, we have to learn, we have to make progress. The urgency of the situation in 1875 and the beginning of a new cycle was from a number of points of views. First, a new cycle was nearly starting, a couple of years, and to be prepared for that new cycle, there was a great need to inject a number of spiritual ideas into the world, and especially in the Western world, so Europe and United States, also part of India. So at least having that ideas activated so that human beings can make use of it and can use them in the new cycles, yeah? What gives, of course, challenging. And the situation in 1875 was not a very flexible one. Thinking was quite, how do you say that, stable. The church was having a big influence. Science was having an idea that we know everything, there is nothing much to learn. Psychology was not very much doing. Philosophical, there was not that much movement, development in it. So Blavatsky was really coming to start, call it a certain fire, and to break the molds of mind, yeah? And if you look in what is the mold of minds in human beings, that is something what we can find very easily in society. If you speak with people and you have ideas, oh, you should do this and you can do that, and so people start to say, no, it's fine to me, leave it as it is, and so on and so on. And that is something, that attitude we have to break. And that is to be broken because we need the progress what has to be made. A very interesting thing was, if you read, and you read it very well in the Mahatma letters, that you see when the corresponding start with the Mahatmas, with Siddhant and Hume, and then we speak about, 88, something like that, yeah, there was always, but also earlier, a question about more training and instructions how to produce occult things, yeah, effects, etc. And Blavatsky was doing quite often in that beginning period some demonstrations, yeah, to show people that things are more flexible and work on a different way than the current idea was, yeah. She was having contact with people like the Shakers and the Spiritists and so on, to show them that what they think, how the world works and what the effects were, what they were able to do, was not really the way they say it works, but that, and Blavatsky tried to demonstrate to them that it will work on a different way. And the effect was that the people start to speak and ask more on this type of phenomena. And that was not really the intention of Blavatsky's mission. And they start to ask, for instance, on the masters by Siddhant and Hume, can we not start a school about occultism? Can we not start a society what will train us, and so on and so on? And that was refused because, as the master explained, Western people have no idea of the consequences if you are able to do this, yeah? So the master did not grant this request. And the only thing what tasted a little bit in that direction was in the time of 1888, Blavatsky starting the ES, and he was giving some study material, some instructions, and there was a little bit of taste in it, where he was showing what was now the force about all the outer phenomena, and what was now the the method to get a little bit of control of that. But the main thing was that the masters say, listen, there is a consequence of it. And if you want to be able to do this, you should live a very pure life. You should really make a very strong pledge, and you should keep that pledge. Yeah. So, because there is quite some number of consequences on it. Yeah. So the consequences of presenting the theosophical teachings, and that is true already for the very simple teachings, but also the teachings what is going much deeper and going what we call occultism. Yeah, that means that the responsibility is there for the person who provides that information. The responsibility is for the receiver. But on the other hand, for the receiver, there is also, as you know how it works, yeah, and you don't, let's say, obey that rule, then the karmic consequences are bigger than you are unknown about it. So the excuse from I didn't know is gone. So you are informed, you are aware of it, and the consequences are heavier. Yeah. What is also explained in the early beginning is what I say here, the knowledge of Theosophy has a pressure cooker effect. Yeah? You know, all the pressure cooker, a pan, you close off, you heat up, the pressure is arising, and the processes in that pan with all the food and so on goes much and much faster. Yeah? Theosophy has the same effect on the people who start to study this. By studying Theosophy, you start much better to realize what is the cause and effect, what is the consequences, and they start to present themselves much faster. Yeah. The good thing is, of course, what I say here on the slide, all the good are coming much faster. Yeah. But all the bad qualities are also coming much faster. So you have to deal with much more karmic consequence, the good and the bad. And that whole process is really accelerated. Accelerated, so that means that life becomes more intense, more intense. To explain that a little bit, I've tried to do this. This is a very nice picture, very colorful picture of an air balloon. And I used that idea of the air balloon to try to explain what is the processes. Yeah. So first we have to realize, and if we know a little bit of physics, we know that at each height there is a corresponding air density. To be in balance, you must adapt your mass accordingly. Yeah. So if you want to race with the air balloon, you have to throw off mass so that you become lighter and go to a higher level. But if you want to stay on a certain level, you need a balance between the mass and the lifting effect of the air. Yeah. So you need a balance, a harmony between your spiritual side and your physical side at that level. So if you want to be more active on the spiritual, we have to realize that we need a corresponding physical part. So if you raise your spiritual level, yeah, then we should realize that we also have to work out something on the physical side. And I use the symbol here that we have to throw off mass, but it is not simple. It means that we have to, let's say, develop ourselves lower body what is able to carry that spiritual influences. Yeah, that is the reason that I say you cannot have a high spiritual part, yeah, working with a very gross physical part, and vice versa. Yeah, so if your physical part is too light, yeah, and your spiritual part is too gross, it's not a good combination. So you have to be in balance. That is a very important thing. Yeah. So, and that is more or less that pressure cooker effect, what is really accelerating this process very much. So this as a symbol, and maybe if you later on think about the air balloon, then you can start to think about it and see how it will work out, yeah? So the consequences is you develop a working equilibrium on a higher level. So a new balance, you can say. And I have put karmic between brackets because that, of course, gives all the karmic effects. It gives you the opportunity to be more active on the spiritual level, but it gives you also the challenge to take care of the lower part, that it starts to work exactly in the same balance, in the equilibrium, what you have to maintain. Yeah? To say it in other words, we are always in equilibrium, but maybe not the equilibrium what we want. So if we want to develop ourselves on high levels, we have to realize that, of course, the whole constitution have to bring in that higher quality. And if we speak about the spiritual aspects, we speak about wisdom, we speak about insight. That are the main things, yeah. And insight we also called quite often the Buddhic aspect of our thinking, yeah. Yeah. The mental is developing insight and harmony, how to deal with it, yeah. And the physical has to go with them. So that means if we grow on the spiritual, slowly, that lower part will go up accordingly. If you read some stories about the training of Blavatsky for 1875, and they are available in the literature, you will see that Blavatsky was also undergo this type of processes, that he was, let's say, becoming more spiritual developed, and the consequence was that he was sometimes ill for a certain period, so that the body has to adapt himself accordingly. So if you go on, then we can say, if you look to the teachings have two, let's say, main qualities, main point of views, the exoteric and the esoteric one. The exoteric is just the outer teachings, yeah? So what is karmic and what are the laws on the outer effects, on the outer side? Not so much about the spiritual things. And the esoteric are the more inner teachings, the power behind all the outer things we see. And that powers behind, that are the real processes. That are what we call the universal laws in nature, according to the Theosophical point of view. Universal laws, of course, the laws of the Theosophy, what the Theosophy called the universal laws, overlay a bit with the physical laws, but we go much further, because coming from the idea that everything is alive and we have no dead matter, that means that everything has the same properties and the same opportunities to be developed and cooperate and so on and so on. And that, of course, gives a complete different point of view how, let's say, molecules, elements working, atoms are working, etc., etc. They all are living beings, yeah. But there is also one step further, and that is what we called occultism. And occultism, that term is used, and you can see where it is coming from, yeah, from the hidden, yeah. That is, the occultist is the one who is always living from the forces behind what you see on the outer field, yeah. And that means that the occultist is living in accordance with that laws. Not so nice to know, and when it is convenient for me, I will use it and apply it. No, you have to apply it all the time, because if you know that it works on this way, you cannot evaluate that laws. You have to obey that laws and have to live in accordance, yeah? The nature of the difficulties in the study of occultism is quite severe. It's quite a challenge to do that study because it brings immediately a lot of consequences. Yeah? So it is the science of things behind the veil of nature, both visible and invisible. Yeah? The study of genuine occultism signifies penetrating deep into the causal mysteries of universal being. So that means if you study that, you start much better to understand what is going on in our solar system. What are the characteristics of the planets? What is the interactions between the planets? What is the interaction between the planets and the sun? What is their relation? What is the relation of the Earth with the other planets and so on? And then not only for, let's say, astronomical point of view, but let's say interrelation point of view of being with being. And to have knowledge on that level gives a huge responsibility. So what is the requirement to do the study in occultism? That is 3 levels of study and living the teachings play as a decisive rule. So what we have to be there is loyalty, discipline, altruism. Loyalty, because we are part of the totality, yeah? We have to realize that by all what we do, we have effect on the other, yeah? Discipline is needed because we have to maintain the rules and follow the rules and live in according to the rules, and not only a bit or only half the day, 24/7. That is the discipline we have to develop. And altruism is that you are never do all that activities for yourself. It is always for the totality. Because if you're going from the idea that we are all one, as Blavatsky described very much in the first fundamental principle of the secret doctrine, if we say we are all ones, then peace and harmony can only be established if we are able to bring it for everything, not only in part. If you do it for a part, you start to bring unbalanced situations and stress and tensions in societies and so on. So, and that makes the whole idea of occultism quite severe, quite a demanding thing to live in accordance with it. I give here a number of ideas of conditions to be an occultist. Yeah? So that is the life and mastering of the universal law, and the requirement, that is a very important one. You cannot serve 2 masters. If you have a place in the hierarchy, and let's say as Theosophy is quite often like, is if we want to work in the hierarchy of the Lords of Wisdom and Compassion, that is then what we have to obey. That is our master. That is our line of command, you can say. And we cannot say, okay, I like a bit this, I like a bit that, and so on and so forth. No, we have to be focused on the one, yeah? 100% all the time. Very high discipline, complete selflessness, complete altruism, and any form of abuse will hinder humanity in development. And that is one of the difficult things to realize, and the master explained it quite often to Hume and Sinnett, and say, listen, if we give you teachings, and you start to work with that insight and the teachings, but you are not do it on a proper way, you should realize that you're disturbed unbalance in the totality, and that will, let's say, handicap your fellow men. So that is also a part of that particular responsibility. Yeah. So keep in mind that if we are sloppy and we overstep that line quite often, we create a lot of consequences for our fellow men. Yeah. What is quite often say, a half true is worse than no true at all. Yeah. Voice of the silence is really that book, what Blavatsky published almost on the end of her life, what gives you an exact description of the mentality you really need to be the occultist and live in harmony with it. Yeah? And there are always, you have to deal with the karmic consequences. No way around it. So, if we go a little bit more look to what did Blavatsky bring as a messenger of the Lords of Wisdom and so on, yeah? So, what you can say from there is she was bringing a lot of teachings, but what is really necessary is the absolute doctrine of the heart. She was really trying to explain that everything is alive, work with each other, interacted. There is no opportunity. You cannot say this and that is not connected or that is disconnected. Now, if you go from that very fundamental principle, everything is interconnected, and everything what we should do, we should realize that it has an effect on the totality. So that is what she really tries to bring in all the teachings. And of course, she was not starting in 1875 with the most, let's say, heavy teachings. Now it was gradually building up and give people time to develop, to learn, and start living in harmony with that ideas, and also try to understand the meaning of the particular teachings. From that Lords of Compassion and Wisdom, there was a spiritual influence. Yeah, ideation is what it's called. Ideation means that there was a stream of spiritual ideas, spiritual images, what was containing the whole explanation and the insight how things are working. So that means helping human beings. So you can ask yourself, yeah, that by receiving these ideas, yeah, that, and I will explain it a little bit later as well, that spiritual ideas in cooperation with the publications was very important, but also to have the open mind to receive that ideas, think about it, consider them for a short or long time, and try to investigate in your own life to see if you are able to recognize it. Because the occult law is you cannot give teaching to someone, you have to train and learn yourself to recognize and apply these teachings. Yeah. So it is not a matter by brain training and by memory, but you have to become that ideas and you have to become that laws. Yeah. And of course, we can only incorporate them on basis of free will. So there was also, by this stream of thoughts, supported by an extensive range of publications. We started in, 1878, I think it was Isis Unveiled, what was published, was in that time a complete new approach, was a very great enthusiasm to read that book and buy it and so on. But it was the first. That was really the first step. Yeah. So the relation between the ideas, the thoughts, and the books, that was an important one. Yeah. So what Blavatsky was in fact doing was sow the seeds of thought life of future generations. So by giving these ideas in the Western human, let's say, field of thinking, yeah, then and she inject that seeds, that means they were available for Western people to receive them. That is the reason that they say ideation, the sender, the person who transmit that ideas, and the ideas, that is the human beings, the receiver, and we get that ideas, and we have the challenge then to receive these ideas, to implement them on, let's say, a very good way, let them grow, work them out, and so on. Yeah. So there is the Maha Chohan's expression, yeah, but there is hardly a theosophist in the whole society unable to effectively help it by correcting the errors, impress of the outside. Or to say it in simple or more direct words is, we as, let's say, becoming theosophists, we are already able to help in society to correct all the wrong ideas. So the Theosophical Society starts to work in 1875, and if you read a little bit of the history, you see that the first half, 3/4 of a year, there were not too much activities. They start on a little bit later, and what we see in the first, let's say, membership meetings, there was this work out objectives. Where do we have to go? Yeah. And we see that in 1875, there were 6 unnumbered objectives. And you see also there is a process going on. December 1879, from the six unnumbered, we go to three objectives. In the key of Theosophy, she speaks about 3 objectives. And in 1890, 1 year before her death, there was a type of final adjustment of the 3 objectives. Yeah, and the next week I will present you the objectives after 1906. So that means 5 years after the death of Blavatsky. So if you want to see that the final ones, the final modifications made during Blavatsky, that was to form the nucleus of a universal brotherhood of humanity, without distinctions of race, creed, sex, caste, or color. Second, to promote the study of the Aryan and other Eastern literatures, religions, philosophies, and science, and to demonstrate their importance to humanity. And the third, to investigate the unexplained laws of nature and the physical powers latent in men. Because Theosophy learned us that as human beings, we have many physical powers latent, not yet developed, but that we can investigate them, we can learn the laws accordingly and learn to control them and apply them. So that is then a very important aspect, yeah? So if you see that in 1888 was a very special year. In 88, she published The Secret Doctrine, volume 1 and 2, and volumes 3 and 4 were only mentioned. She was forming the Esoteric School, publication of the pledge for that school, and the formation of the inner group. Yeah. So let's first have a look on the Secret Doctrine. So if you see, the Secret Doctrine is a quite big 2-volume, let's say, book or books. What is it in total? I think 1,300, 1,400 pages or something like that. Yeah. And if you start to read in it, you see immediately this is no text for normal daily relaxation in the evening and so on. It is all quite deep philosophical and bring a lot of ideas, what is certainly, and even not nowadays, not a very common point of view in our society. Not then, in 1888, certainly not now either. So, and to make these ideas acquainted to yourself, you need a very long time of study and considerations and looking it out, investigating, and so on, and work on it. But the reason is that this book was just coming in 1888, so that means already 13 years after the start, is that the 13 years were really needed for building a type of layer in making a progress to this type of information, prepare the members and the human beings interested in it, prepare them to start already to think in a certain line, so that the secret doctrine, on the moment that it was published, was, let's say, at least welcomed, and people are willing to do an investigation. Blavatsky speaks about the volumes 3 and 4, and on certain moments he said, yes, 3 and 4 is ready, can be published. Is never done. And why it is never done, you can easily understand if you take the volumes 1 and 2, and even the difference between 1 and 2 is already big. 1 is easier, cosmology is easier than 2, anthropomology. So that number 2 is much harder to understand. And what you need is at least a certain level of understanding of the volumes 1 and 2 before you can have a look in 3 and 4. Yeah? Otherwise, it is too difficult. So it works out that the masters and Blavatsky say, no, we put it on hold, 3 and 4, that will come later. The formation of the ES, the Esoteric School, sometimes also called the Western School, yeah, was an important step. She published the pledge in the magazine Lucifer, so that was a public magazine, and she makes aware that there was organized a school, esoteric school, what was free from the Theosophical Society, was not having an interconnection with the Theosophical Society. The only requirement was, if you want to apply for the esoteric school, you have to be a member of the Theosophical Society, and then you have to take that pledge to become a member. And there was a certain idea behind starting the ES. Because if you can understand maybe a little bit what I have told you now, is that if you want to maintain the Theosophical ideas, teachings for the coming, let's say, 2000 years, you not only need publications and maintaining that publications in the original form, what is by itself all a challenge nowadays, yeah, but you also need a group of people what keeps that ideas belonging to that information alive. Yeah? So that means that people maintaining the ideas in, let's say, the field of thoughts of the human beings keeps that ideas alive, so that people who start to read that documentation start to concentrate on the documentation, tune their receiver on this frequency, and starts also to pick that ideas what was already in that atmosphere. There was a very nice example to demonstrate this effect on a very common way that is done by Sheldrake in the many years ago, and he did an investigation that the London Times, the magazine in London, what was published in the morning, was also published in the afternoon in Edinburgh, in Scotland. And in that in the Times, the London Times, there was also every day, how do you call it, a crossword word puzzle, yeah? And he was doing an investigation, and he had the following idea. He's saying, if that solution to that puzzle is once put, what he calls in the cosmic fields, then if another one tries to solve it, he needs less time than the people who start afresh. So he was doing a type of investigation, statistics, and it really works out that the people in Edinburgh need less time to solve that puzzles than the people in the boarding in London. This is exactly the same idea that it is needed, that we need people maintaining that ideas and keep them alive. And that was one of the reasons that Blavatsky started the esoteric schools. He said, this must be the backbone for the Theosophical society. Yeah? Backbone also meaning that if there comes a time of difficulties, as he knew that there was certainly coming a time of difficulties after her passing away, that there should be a group what is in all the time able to maintain the principles and upkeep them and keep them alive and so on. From that esoteric group, she, how do you say it, distracted what is called the inner group. 6 women, 6 men. It was only on invitation that you were becoming a member of that inner group. They had a more severe pledge than the pledge of the ES, yeah? Or let's say the pledge was not too far away from each other, but in the inner group, they expected to maintain that pledge 100% all the time, yeah? That inner group was thus not done. The members of that group were not done in that time, that later on it was coming, let's say, known to other people and so on. And if you are a member of the ES, and you have to be a member of the ES before you are able to become a member of the inner group, there was no mean that you can write a letter and say, I want to be a member of the inner group. If you are doing that, you are excluded immediately. It was only on invitation. So, and that is the reason that that inner group is so important to maintain that thoughts world, that thoughts idea. In the coming Lucifer, there is an article about coming the thinking fields and the thinking area, written by Byron Forham, what tries to explain this idea is a little bit more. Very practical, very good to make study of, yeah? So, and that the main thing is, Theosophy does not stay alive by books only, yeah? Books are just a mean to tune, yeah? So tuning means that we start to read it, we concentrate on it, and that makes self, let's say, sensitive to receive information from the inner spheres where these ideas are available. And then, of course, what they say, it takes people to keep the ideas alive by living them. Not only thinking, but by living them. That is the main important thing, yeah? So, we have a challenge. What is her mission now? Because 1875, all the information is here, yeah? We are now in 2025, we are 150 years further. We can ask ourselves that, what should we do for keeping that mission alive? There is a very famous letter made by Master Chohan. The letter has the name, the letter of the Maha Chohan, because Master Chohan writes down that letter. He say, I had yesterday evening a talk with the Maha Chohan, and these are the highlights out of our conversation. And I have taken just a few out of them. He says something very important. Maha Chohan is always saying important things, of course. We have to preach and popularize a knowledge of Theosophy. To preach and popularize. Or you can say, as a Theosophist, you can expect that you are willing to promote the ideas, to make them known to all your fellow men, yeah? And popularize, and that is a challenge in itself, is try to describe the teachings in your own words, but without violating the principles. Not this is as I understand it. No, this is as the master is saying, Blavatsky is saying, and so on, and try to focus and give the information so that other people can start to speak about it. Birthday parties, ideal. Let's say other parties, you have to speak with a lot of other people. You speak about something very general. You can give your view from Theosophical point of view on that subject and try to show that from a different knowledge you can have a different view on problems nowadays and how you should solve them. So, yet it is absolutely necessary to incommunicate it gradually, enforce its theories, unimplicable facts for those who knows, gradually. So that means also that we are not able to give all the people the full secret doctrine at once. That will not work because there is too much. So we have to give ideas step by step so that they are approaching. Yeah? My recommendation is always, if you want to make a start to understand, let's say, the secret doctrine, take the proem. The proem is 45 or 46 pages, yeah? And where Blavatsky is explaining, or the master by Blavatsky is explaining, how you should build up the ideas and which main fundamental principles you have always to maintain in your thinking, keep them up, and they should never be violated. They should always be respected. And that is the nice one, is it is time that Theosophy should enter the arena. If you look nowadays, some people have quite a, let's say, quite a bold understanding by arena. That means fighting and so on. Now, I think that what is said here is we should bring Theosophy in daily life. So if we as a human being, we have to maintain our, let's say, social duties, our democratic, let's say, duties, and so on, we should do them according to our understanding of Theosophy. That means we bring Theosophy into the daily life principles, yeah? And if we deal with quarrels with our neighbors, or let's say other things with other people, we have always to maintain the Theosophical principles to respect them, to bring them out. To be true, religion and philosophy must offer the solution to every problem. And that is also an important thing. If Theosophy is universal wisdom, universal with capital letters, and wisdom also with a capital W, then it should mean that we should be able to solve all problems we have in daily life. And that is the basic, let's say, line in Theosophy, religion and philosophy. Yeah? Sometimes we say Theosophy is the synthesis of religion, philosophy and science. So all the three together give us the answer on the daily life problems. And then, this is also a lovely one. You say, no, good brothers, you have been laboring under the mistake too long already. Let us understand each other. He who does not feel competent enough to grasp the noble idea sufficiently to work from it, needs not to undertake a task too heavy for him. So if you have the idea, this is too much, this requires me too much, then I think you should try to be a little bit modest. But I think everybody is able, according to the bullets before, to bring at least something in society. One of the best ways to promote the Theosophical ideas is to be a living example. You don't need all the words to express them, but being a living example. So that means that you act in society on a certain way, that sometimes people become curious and say, what is the reason that you are so easily can cope with this problem and that problem? And then you have by the other one an open door, what is much better than try to push on them. But if the door is open, then you can easily give them, let's say, a bit of that bigger influence. Yeah. So if you look to that whole effect of the mission of Blavatsky, I take here Matthew 13 as a comparison. Is Matthew 13 speaks about the sower, yeah, and he speaks about seeds, and there you can see in all the following points seeds, what is taken by the birds, seeds what is falling inside the let's say the soil, seeds what is falling on the road, seeds what is burned by the sun, and so on and so on. There are all examples what can happen, and you can see the similarity in this let's say parable, and say, okay, if you try, as Blavatsky was doing, to saw some ideas will be very much welcomed. They are really dropping on very open-minded people. They are really waiting for this type of ideas. Some people, they reacted. Some people have a closed mind and are not open for the ideas. So you can see exactly in Matthew 13 the example of what can happen with ideas Blavatsky was to try to spread around. To receive ideas, so think a little bit on the sowing of the seeds, yeah? What do we, how do we receive them, yeah? So there is a lot of resources we have developed, yeah? But we have to realize we receive them just as we are. We can only do so according to our own character. So if your character is very stiff and very close-minded, you are not very open for new ideas. Yeah, we can only receive a part of that spectrum of the ideas according to, let's call it, our openness of our receiver, the tuning of our receiver, our properties. Yeah. So, but the good thing, of course, is and being a sender and being a receiver, it can be trained. So first, for us to receive, yeah, being open, think about it, do not react ideas we don't understand, because the Theosophy will give you many ideas you don't understand in the first instance. You need time to understand them. So you understand them, and if you understand them and you start to think about it and speak about it, you will be a transmitter and sender on U-turn. So you will send them as well. And that is something what can be trained very much. Yeah, that is the reason I say both are trainable. We have courses, Universal Wisdom, where we spend an 18, 19 evenings training and speaking with each other about universal wisdom, how to understand, how to cope with it, and how to apply in life. Yeah. So the main thing we have is how do we continue her work? And now, by all my saying up to now, you can easily understand that we can continue her work by, of course, keeping the original publications in life, because we need them to being a mean for tuning people on that fields of thoughts. And we need people what maintain the ideas to keep them alive in daily life, to apply them, to live them, and so on. Yeah, and that is an important thing. I have a number of quotes. So first one of the Peruker, the fourth leader of the Theosophical Society, Point Loma, and he did it to his members at The Hague. It was. Our task for the future is to lay the foundation upon which will be built the spiritual and intellectual inspiration and salvation of future men and future women. That is our task. So that is done in a different wording, But that means that we have to make, to keep that ideas alive, yeah, accessible. The Theosophical movement was established by the masters to be the guiding light in the world. It was formed not so much to be replaced, it was formed not so much to replace, but to show and explain the hard teachings of the present great religions and philosophies, such as Buddhism, Christianity, Brahmanism, Taoism, and all the others. And that is the main thing what you can easily pick up in our previous lectures in this series from January on, is that all that main religions are, you can say, other manifestations, other implementations of the same theosophical universal idea, what we most of the time called Theosophia, and then, let's say, presented in the time of Gautama the Buddha, by Gautama the Buddha, what is nowadays called Buddhism, by Jesus the Nazarene, what is now called Christianity, and so on, yeah, Taoism by Lao Tse, and so on. So that are all, let's say, presentation forms of the same Theosophia in that particular culture and time. So, thus, it is that I foresee that the Theosophical movement will be the vehicle of the dissemination among men of the wisdom teachings, and that these teachings will grow not only in number, but in expanded explications. So that out of the present Theosophical teachings will grow the grand world religion of future ages. Out of the present will grow the religions and the philosophies of the future. That is our task. And we cannot do our task if we do not lay the foundation right now. The main question to close off my lecture is, what can we expect from what we are leaving behind? And that is how do you say that? A sensitive question, because that is something what is a question we can apply for ourselves, ask ourselves and say, what do I left behind on theosophical principles and, let's say, information? How good can we, is that information still there? How good it will be alive? How good we can pick it up if you come back in a next, let's say, incarnation? And you know, it is only 150 years from 1875 to this year, yeah, that is only a fraction of the 2000 years. Blavatsky was saying that her mission was meant for the coming 2000 years. So if you try to make a balance on this particular moment and you ask yourself, what is the status of Theosophy nowadays in this world? And how strong is it to be alive for the coming 150 years? So that is 1,850 years to come, yeah? If you want to be very particular on the year, then we can ask ourselves, will that be still available as it is now? So I think, as Theosophies, we have a tremendous amount of work to do to keep it in such condition that it is also, let's say, available. But keep in mind, it is not only a matter of maintaining the original publications alive. They are good, they are needed, but it is also very important to keep the ideas alive, to live them and promote them. Now, this was my lecture. We have now 3 minutes pause for give you the opportunity to raise your questions, and after the 3 minutes, we start first to answer the questions. Erwin, are there questions?
No, not on YouTube for the moment. So I guess we can continue our study via Zoom.
Okay. I think it is time to close. Okay, we close with the Gayatri. O thou golden sun of most excellent splendor, illuminate our hearts and fill our minds, so that we, recognizing our oneness with the divinity, which is the heart of the universe, may see the path before our feet and tread it to those distant goals of perfection, stimulated by thine only radiated light.